Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance. Today, we're very happy to have Kelly Brennan, a voiceover talent and also an audio description narrator. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
What do you love about audio description?
Audio description for me came from kind of a personal reason. My mom wears 2 hearing aids. She's basically deaf without her hearing aids. And so I'm always kind of aware of people and what I call almost like hidden disabilities and how isolating that can be. And also how sometimes people don't have patience for those that have those kind of hidden disabilities. So I'm very sensitive to that. And obviously being a voice talent, trying to do anything to assist my mother who can't hear is not going to happen. And one day I happened on audio description and it hit me that this is something I wanted to do because if I can't help her, how cool is it that I can actually use my voice to help other people? And I kind of fell in love.
And you've got a healthy background in voiceover, so you transitioned to also adding audio description narration to your talents?
Yeah, I have been doing voiceover for, oh my gosh, about almost 18 years now that I think about it. That's insane. But yeah, I did. I've done audio books, I've done commercial work, e-learning, narration, the whole gamut, a lot of kids stuff. I actually wrote my own children's books because I was trying to find more work and I ended up on QVC twice selling those. They were personalized read-along, sing-along coloring books for kids where I hired an artist, we made books, and then I did the voiceover individually for, oh my gosh, on QVC, I think I sold almost 3,000 of them and I produced them all here in my basement. So yeah, kind of run the gamut. Now that I have found out about audio description, I'm kind of pivoting, trying to kind of pivot my entire business, actually. Continuing with those things in my current clients and certainly not giving that aspect of voiceover up, but that I just have this newfound love, I guess. And so I've decided that audio description and I need to start dating. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, no, I just have fallen in love with so much of it and the whole aspect of it that I'm going to try to make a pivot.
Very great. And it sounds like if we could talk a little bit about the experiences that you've had with whether it's the children's books or audiobooks or e-learning, and maybe some similarities to or differences to audio description. Maybe if we could start with your assumptions of what audio description was, and then once you started doing audio description, how that was similar to or maybe different than some of the other voice work that you've done.
So what did I think audio description was? I totally came on audio description by accident. It was somehow switched on something I was watching. Initially, I was just kind of, looking around going, what is that extra noise? What is, like, who's talking? I was very confused by the whole process, actually. And then as I was trying to turn the noise off, I realized that this was on purpose because I thought it was an accident. I was like, oh my God, well, I'm totally geeky like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of cool. Like they're reading the stage directions and they completely didn't know that somehow or another they've left these on. It was a movie I'd never seen before and I was watching it on my computer and all that other stuff. And then I realized, no, it was actually on purpose. And I kind of laughed at myself. So I left it on. I was fascinated by it. I got into voiceover through theater. I started off in theater. So, you're used to having all of those stage directions available to you. And that's kind of what audio direction felt like to me at first. I just kept listening. So I don't know if I had any assumptions. Probably, if anything, it was more relating it back to the whole theater world and that it was just this kind of undercurrent of being able to help move the story along. When I started to really get into listening to audio description, because I am a complete research nerd, I research way too much. It was interesting to see that there were these different styles of audio description. And then to like what your question really was how does it relate back to me? I had to kind of listen and decide like, what is this audio description business and where do I fit and how do I fit? And I still think that you fit wherever the person who's hiring you thinks you fit, really. I think that my voice tends to lend to a younger market, but it's interesting because I think that sometimes I'm working on things that are a little bit opposite that, which is an interesting sound. Just like sometimes, you don't listen to me and say, oh, she should do medical voiceover because I don't have that kind of clinical sound, but I have actually gotten hired for a lot of medical voiceover when I'm talking to patients. If I'm talking to patients about their choices when it comes to breast cancer and all of that. So I have found that while in my mind, I've sometimes might pigeonhole myself to a certain sound by allowing clients to say, well, you might not be the typical sound for this specific category, but because of who our market is, you actually play well to it. So I think sometimes I have to make sure I keep myself open. I don't have to just pigeonhole into one little spot. That was a really long explanation. I'm sorry.
It's so great because what I'm hearing is that adjustment, that tuning that you've made really feeds into your research nerd and your curiosity. In other words, I'm hearing that by you simply asking, where do I fit? You're trying to see, okay, here's this background I have with doing voiceover, with doing research, with really recognizing how I've been hired before and how that may or may not fit my expectations, that you're really open to finding what that fit is and to adjust and tune accordingly. That it's a successful model for you to accomplish what you want within other areas of voiceover. And of course, it's going to apply to audio description is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think it is. It's that ebb and flow where, as an actor, we all are typecast. You're an ingenue, I can't think of anything else right now, but you're a character actress, those types of things. So I think, and a lot of times as an actor, you like to try to say, oh, I can do everything. When in reality, you do kind of get pigeonholed and you tend to book the same types of gigs. And what I have found in voiceover is that while you can book the same types of gigs, and yes, nobody can do everything, even though as an actor, we think we can and we want to be able to, but that doesn't mean that somebody isn't seeing you. Like I said, I might have done a Barbie commercial. So people are like, oh, she's got that voice. She does everything for kids. But then I'm explaining to women about their choices of breast cancer in a medical thing because I still do have that real conversational sound. So it is almost kind of like, oh, that's just your friend telling you all of this medical stuff to make it seem easier, which is not a route I would have ever gone until someone approached me for that.
That's great. And with that patient medical information, that you're providing access to something in the same way that you're providing access to those, as you said, and I don't think I've heard that stage directions before, that theater comparison that within audio description. It's really nice. Yeah.
It's so what it is too. Like stage directions do that. They kind of do what audio description does.
So when you look about your research over the last however many years that you've been doing research in audio description, have you seen some changes in audio description since you started?
There does kind of feel like there's two camps, and I'm not going to say which camp I think is better than the other. No, I'm just kidding. I don't, there isn't one that's better than the other. There seems to be two camps. There's kind of this camp of the sound is, I don't want to say not emotional, but it is much straighter. It's just providing information. It's not necessarily leading the audience either way. It's just kind of right down the center. And then I think there is another camp where there is much more melody to the description. You might be playing a little bit more to the music that you're hearing as you're speaking, or to the genre. If you're doing comedy, there might be a little bit more lilt, in the describer's voice. If it's a much more serious moment, you might feel that gravity in their voice as well. So there are these two camps, and because I haven't been in audio description as long as some other people, Roy Samuelson, I don't know which camp, if they're just two different styles, or if there's kind of one that's considered the more traditional one and one that's a little bit more modern. So that part has definitely been interesting. But it's interesting to just see how the streaming, obviously the companies that are working with streaming, I mean, they are just popping out original shows. It's surprising to see how many original shows are coming out with the AD, which is fabulous. I mean, right away. So there is no delay. And I think that, they're trying to slowly build the back catalog, the back library, but it's the cool thing to be able to say, hey, this is releasing, and it's releasing with AD and closed captioning all at once. That's exciting. And I think that's really a cool thing for blind and low vision audiences, that they don't have to feel like they're waiting, that they don't have to feel like, oh, we weren't thought of right away, that they're saying, hey, look, we value everyone that wants to take part in our entertainment, and that we understand there are different. And a big part, you and I have talked about this before, but and I mentioned this at the top, that a big part for me is the isolation, that it can be very hard that, yes, you might go to a movie with someone who is low vision or blind, and that you're all driving home in the car and you're talking about something and it was a visual aspect and they have no idea what it is. And that while you're like, oh, but you were with us, but was I? There is that part that just the isolation aspect of it kills me. So the fact that these things are coming out quickly, that's awesome.
And I think combining those 2 points of the right away, the systemic change that streaming has been a part of with their original content, of having access, as you said, with audio description and other forms of access that aren't necessarily how films always used to be. That right away with audio description combined with what you're saying with the isolation, I think I personally believe there's a fair argument to be made, back to those camps that you were talking about, that instead of leading the audience, it's allowing them to join in the immersive experience, and that is a high wire act, and that both camps can be true within one piece of content. In other words, there's going to be times where the audience needs the voice talent to step back a little bit and let the film score or emotional things draw them in. And then there's going to also be times where a voice talent needs to help nudge. This is a scene change. So the audio description narrator can insert the slightest little pause or maybe give a different kind of read within the same sentence to indicate that there's a change, that all of these elements within the voice talent's ability can make the audience's immersion closer to that of the sighted audiences as far as the visuals go. That I think there's a fair argument to be made that I think both camps are right, and it just depends on how that application of which camp for that particular element is going to be most necessary. If I could basically say that you're right, it's like both are true, and it's contextually incredibly relative, but it's just an opinion, and it's fascinating to be able to have these conversations, simply because we are so past the point of does it have audio description or not? And your contribution to voiceover in general and your contribution to audio description specifically is feeding that conversation to be, how great can audio description be? And that's the next question. How great can audio description be from your perspective?
It's interesting. I think that, again, the whole 2 camps thing, I agree with you. I think that there is room, even in one piece, for both. And I think some people that I've talked to look at audio description as it's a straight narration job. You're just providing information. Andrew said something. They said that audio description is part of the entertainment aspect. I was like, they just hit the nail on the head, because that's perfect. That is what it is. So that while, yes, we can provide information and there is this narration aspect to it, but if in the back of your mind, you always kind of have this little check mark on, we are helping to provide entertainment, and that can kind of maybe probably help us bridge, where do we need to be much more of a just straight narration, and where do we need to go along with the vibe of the piece. I think that helps as long as we keep that, we are entertaining. There is something to it. It isn't just this straight, I'm providing a piece of e-learning. So I think that if we kind of keep that as an undercurrent almost, at least that's kind of the way that I'm trying to approach my journey into audio description narration. When they said that, I was just, a light bulb went off. I'm like, that's exactly what it is.
Very great. And it's so great to hear that this streaming company, which is one of the newer ones to join audio description access, to be able to have that perspective and be so clearly vocal about it. I mean, that's what we had said earlier. In contrast to the isolation, it's now that immersion. That's part of the writing. That's part of the mix. That's part of the voice that you bring to the work. And I'm curious if you could specifically address an experience that you've had in your own craft of audio description. You don't have to go into a specific detail of a title if you don't want to, but I'm curious if you could name an experience that you had where maybe there was a challenge within you recording or you voicing that was like, here's how I do this, that you brought that curiosity that you talked about with research into the actual recording, into the actual production, so that you could help our audience understand, hey, here's something that kind of came up that I wasn't expecting, and here's how I overcame that challenge or that barrier or whatever.
Well, I think with audio description, what's nice is kind of being able to listen to yourself and make sure that your tone is matching the piece, if that makes sense. So for example, if I'm doing something that's more geared towards kids, my voice is probably going to live a little bit higher in my space because it just lends better. That's kind of a friendlier tone that kids can hear. But if I'm doing a piece that's a little more dramatic, then I'm going to make sure that I'm living down in my lower tones. I don't know if I'm really answering your question.
This is great. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that is something that I have kind of found when I'm looking at the piece that I've been given. Like, where does it need to live in me to make it believable and make it accepting to the audience that's receiving it? It kind of came on me as a surprise as I was listening back to a project I was working on. And it was my second audio description project that I had done. So I was listening back and I was watching the piece with my description. And I had realized, because I was nervous because it was new and I wouldn't do a really good job, I was kind of living up here. And I was like, okay, I sound like a 7-year-old who is narrating a piece that needs to be done by a 30-year-old, And so I had to make sure that I kind of redid the whole thing because I wanted to not sound completely out of place.
Yes, very great. Well, I think you've already answered this, but I have to ask if you'd like to add anything more to it. Where do you want to see audio description headed? You've already made that link to the ACB panel that Carl hosted with HBO saying about providing that entertainment experience. You've talked about removing the isolation, or the positive side of that is making sure that the audience is in the story. You've talked about how you've applied your research and how that's contributed to your approach to quality, which can help our audiences. Are there any other things that you see audio description headed that you'd love to see?
I think, and it's headed in this direction in a lot of ways. It's not just TV and film, but I think the fact that it can be led into all different aspects of people's lives, the museums, the theaters, there's so many different places that I think audio description can live. So I think too, thanks to people like you, people are becoming more aware of it. It's a slow burn, of course, but I think awareness is key. And so that the more aware people are of what it is and how it helps low vision and blind audiences, it's just something that can be in so many places. And with our world exploding with the internet and how much video is out there now, it shouldn't be just limited to what we might think is obvious right now as far as television and film, but we should open up. I mean, we're starting to see some commercials that are starting to be audio described, but there's just so many places, and we just need to be aware of the end. The end is really the audience and the people who do have low vision and are blind. And that when we look at it from that aspect, that we're looking at people. And that's the big thing for me. And like I said, probably because it's all back to my mom, and I've seen how frustrated people can be when she can't hear them. And I've seen that frustration, and I've seen her feeling badly about having a disability. And I think anything we can do for anyone that wipes that out is important. And if I can do anything to help with that, then I'm all in.
This is a tag on to the access for audiences. Do you also feel that blind and low vision talents involved in audio description is an essential part of this work?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because in reality, those of us that are sighted and that are doing our part to help, we know nothing compared to what they know. The knowledge and, the firsthand experience that anyone who is low vision or blind can bring to the table is only going to make any of us better. I mean, I think that should go without saying, that they should have that opportunity. And again, to the point of, just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they should be discounted in any way, shape, or form. So I think that to not include them would be just wrong. I mean, I think if someone wants that opportunity, then they should absolutely have that opportunity. And if they're the right voice, the right writer, the right describer, then they should be thrown into the mix just like anybody else.
How can people reach you, Kelly? Either on social media, websites, that sort of thing?
KellyBrennan'svoice.com. KELLY. BRENNANS voice.com.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Roy.